But our subject is none other than the legendary Jon Anderson, and very few musicians have traveled the kind of terrain that this man has. For 35 years as a founding member of the progressive and influential rock band Yes, Jon Anderson has had legendary collaborations with numerous musicians over the years, and let's face it, he appeared rather prominently in the forefront of MTV breakout technology in terms of videos. Some of the most iconic early 80s videos he was involved with because of Yes and their monster hits from 1983 and 84. Now let's face it, some of those are a little quaint by today's comparison. Some of the videos play a little dated. The songs, and this is what matters, the songs are awesome. Not the least of which, the biggest hit of Yes's career and one of the biggest hits of the entire decade, Owner of a Lonely Heart. But we have a very special opportunity to sit down for the entire show with Mr. Jon Anderson. In fact, it's not us so much as Steve Wagner, a longtime contributor and friend of Soundwaves. And I've known Steve for almost 15 years. We've worked together on a myriad of projects together, and I can tell you he considers himself to be a lifelong Yes fan. So given the opportunity to sit down at Jon's home in his studio and actually talk a little shop, this is one of the great moments of Steve's life. And considering that Jon's been around for 35 years and Steve is only 28, this is actually a great opportunity for him. So without any further ado, let's see what that conversation looks like.
It's amazing that that you're going to be at the Harmony Festival this year. It feels really synchronistic to myself and to really everybody involved with the festival. Everybody's tremendously excited that you're going to be there. And what do you expect to bring to the festival? What are you hoping to get out of it?
More than anything, I think the question would be, I just want to put on a good show, just do a very good concert, and sing this. It's a sort of one-man show that I started doing last year. The first song I sing is Harmony. Harmony is the connection to the center of your heart and the connection to the center of your soul when you're in harmony, not just with one or two things, but with everything. You become in harmony with nature, your loved ones, the people you meet, and you try to create harmony wherever you go.
If the Beatles opened the door, Yes stepped through the door, and I think that a lot of people feel that.
Well, I don't know.
I do think that a lot of people
feel
that.
I come from that time when the Beatles were God.
Right.
You know, gods, and I actually met them, and it was like meeting these. To me, they are still an incredible influence on my life.
Sure.
And you know, to be thought about in the same breath as them is kind of bizarre to me, you can imagine, you know. But I remembered when we were recording the Yes album and Fragile and Close to the Edge especially, there was always a funny feeling I would get listening to the recordings. I'd be in the studio and I'd listen to them and I'd feel this sort of, it's hard to put into words, but it's sort of vibrational energy as I heard it back and thought, wow, that's a really interesting feeling.
How important is this spiritual aspect? We certainly feel it in your music. Is this something that you strive to have and experience in your music?
Yeah, it's part of the growing up experience, the growing into understanding what we're surrounded with, and again, to find the creator is to find all that is. I think that comes from, again, Native American or Aborigine culture. All that is all that is all that is God. It ain't some guy with a white beard who just happens to be white, who lives on a hill somewhere, sort of thing, which is drummed into us as children to be in fear of God and the Holy Ghost and all that kind of stuff, and it kind of freaked me out as a kid. And I think when I started getting success with Yes, it really inspired me to try and discover why I would get success. Why me? Because there's tons of people out there striving for the same thing, yet I was able to have and sustain a career out of singing. Right. Something that I used to do as a kid for nothing. You know, what's happening next week is there's a film coming out called Rock School, and it's these young kids in Philadelphia. We met them on our tour.
Yes. It's a documentary.
Documentary.
Yes.
And it's pretty good. It's these guys, teenagers, learning Frank Zappa music and going to Germany to perform Frank Zappa music in front of a German audience that wants to hear Frank Zappa, and they're teenagers, you know. And they recorded Heart of the Sunrise, and I sang it for them. And we're going to do it next Tuesday night after the film premieres, you know. So you think, hey, these young kids are playing Yes music. It's kind of bizarre, yet amazing at the same time, that it is complicated, but there are always people readily equipped to practice and really make it work. So who knows, in years to come, you know, young teenagers will play a couple of these songs, a Zappa song, a Yes song, my Vishnu piece, you know, as part of the deal of learning music.
That is great stuff. We thank John so much for coming down to the show, and we're going to rejoin that interview in just a little bit. But first, a little musical history. In 1983, Yes had been broken up for almost 3 years when John Anderson joined a side project called Cinema, with Yes members Tony Kaye, Chris Squire, Alan White, and producer Trevor Horn. Once Anderson was asked to contribute his signature vocals, the project officially became a Yes album. But not just any album, mind you. No, we're talking about a complete reinvention of the entire Yes mythos. Gone was the progressive rock 10-minute tracks, and all of a sudden they had smart, sharp, very contemporary sounding singles, not the least of which was a #1 song for Yes and one of the #1 songs of 1983. We're talking about the very catchy and very classic Owner of a Lonely Heart.
Did you always know that that's what you wanted to do?
No, I wanted to play soccer for England, like Rod Stewart and most rock and roll singers. You want to play soccer for your national team, you know, basically. But the idea of being able to be making music, and especially these days to be able to travel the world and know that people know some of your songs, and you have a relationship with your audience, and I think songs happen to bring back memories. So people will hear Long Distance Runaround, and I'll sing it, and it'll take them 20 years back in their life to the first time they heard it, maybe 30 years, probably. 30 years ago when it first came out, and it was a good radio song, so it's part of the show that I do. I think it was because I actually hadn't got a great education. You know, I left school when I was 14, so I wasn't so knowledgeable in a poetic sense. So when I would write, I would just write it out and then just look at it and sing it and take a straighter, stronger course to the corner of your life, you know, and so on. You just, that sounds nice. I don't know what it means so much, or maybe it means getting closer to your, later on I'd start to really understand what I was writing. So a lot of it was very metaphor, and I still do that. I'm still writing more, like you said, a stream of consciousness. You write stuff down and hope that it sings. And the more you sing it, the more you say, hey, that sounds good, actually, it sings nicely. I'll stick to it. And then you try to give it a meaning later.
There's a relationship between your music and Yes's music and Roger Dean's art that's basically unique in the world of popular music. What do you think accounts for that? What is it about Roger's art that seems to capture the essence of Yes's music and vice versa?
It's harmony again, so I can use the word, because it is. When Roger walked into our world, he was part of our world. He was, the way he talked, the way he thought, the way we wanted to send him the music. Here's some basic ideas of the next song we're going to do. Here's the next album. We'd send him the album way before it was finished, so that he could start working on visualization. And I got very involved in the concept of everything being Roger Deanism, if you like, and all the paperwork from the office would be Roger Dean designed, and T-shirts and things like that. And most everybody thought I was crazy, so it didn't happen. But it just seemed, why not? You know, you're gonna give the band a visual stamp as well as a musical stamp. And that's when we started doing concerts, and Roger and his brother would design the staging, because I just got more in the idea, well, we're making so much music, why not make it more theater? Why not I always remember Joe's Lights from the old hippie days, you know, and how amazing it was to go to a concert, hear great music, but also see visual energy, you know.
We mentioned the Beatles earlier. The Beatles, I think, Rolling Stones, they made everybody want to play music and be in a band.
Yeah.
Yes's music, however, helped people want to transform and change the direction of their lives. And how do you feel about that? Have you seen that?
No, I don't look into it from any other perspective. That what I was going through was a life-changing experience of becoming famous, becoming successful, maintaining some form of clarity about what we were musically trying to do, and argue that point throughout, and make sure it was we never let down our commitment to make our music stand for the word that we created the band to be. Yes is a definite thing. It's something very positive. Think positive, musically positive, lyrically positive, and eventually you become what you believe to be the creation that you've become involved in, if that makes any sense, and that you are changing yourself and your perception of life. So in fact, you are changing other people's self and perception of life as much as anything does, as much as seeing a bird fly by you, a little hummingbird comes by you and it looks at you and it changes your perception of life.
Of all the music that you've written, what songs in particular move you the most personally now, or the most you?
There's so many. The songs that I will perform at the Harmony Festival, there's a couple in there that I'm learning. One is about a song called White Buffalo. It's very funny because my daughter comes up and she plays me her sort of groovy hip hop stuff, and she says, "What are you doing, Dad?" I said, "Oh, I sung White Buffalo." And she says, don't want to know. I said, "Yeah, it's a beautiful song." And I sing it to her and she'll say, "It's a lovely song. Why did you write that?" I said, "Because there was a white buffalo that was born in 1987, and it's a prophecy. It's an ancient prophecy that when that comes, it's the changing of the world." And in 1987, we had the harmonic convergence. And a guy called me the other week about using Holy Lamb, which is a song I wrote around that period about the harmonic convergence. And whenever I look back over the songs, I love Awaken, of course, is a piece for Yes to perform. But every song from even the beginning of the band, every song that I was involved in writing or wrote myself, I just have a great love of. So, and they all have different meanings for me. Even Survival from the first album, you know, is all about nature, you know, and we think perpetual change. We think we can change the world. Sorry, it doesn't work that way, you know. Oh, we're going to change the weather. Yes, well, no, it doesn't work that way. You know, as we've seen incredibly so this last few months with the tsunami, that the world can just change things.
How important is humor to your creative process?
Well, we come from the school of Monty Python, you see, and even before that we had the Goons, which were very famous in England.
Peter Sellers.
Yeah,
right.
I was actually singing a song, Ying Tong, Ying Tong, Ying Tong, Ying Tong, Ying Life. I've actually sung that song. It's a Spike Milligan song on my latest DVD. I just had to do it because at the back of it, you know, especially when we became very famous in 1984, we had On of a Lonely Heart, #1 everywhere. We were big and famous. Within a week of starting that tour, I went to see Spinal Tap, and I couldn't watch the band on stage without laughing. So all through that tour, you just see film of me laughing and smiling. It's because we are so Spinal Tap. So you can't take yourself serious, you know. There are times when you got to be serious about what you're doing and rehearsal and things like that. But in the long run, you know, it's not brain surgery.
That's some amazing interview footage, a Soundwaves exclusive with this guy, Steve Wagner, and John Anderson from Yes. This must have been a thrill for you.
It was incredible, Dennis. I've been a Yes fan for 30 years. I was 14 years old when I got the first.
I was giving you a little too much credit.
Yeah,
there
exactly. Well, when I got the Yes album, I was 14 years old, and it changed my life. It's one of the reasons why I became a musician, and meeting John and interviewing him was certainly an enormous thrill.
You had an opportunity that most just casual music fans don't, much less with a guy at this level. You actually were invited to his home to do the interview.
He was very, very gracious about it. He invited us down. We spent about 3 hours with him. He gave us a tour of his studio. We saw all of his guitar collection, which is very impressive. All of his custom-made guitars and a number of guitars that he's built himself, MIDI guitars. He strums a chord and you hear an orchestra, you know. We sat outside. He sat on the hammock that many Yes fans will remember from his interviews in the documentary Yes Speak. And we just spent a couple of hours talking. And after we finished the interview, we continued talking for another hour. He was just a beautiful guy, and it was a great honor.
So it sounds to me that your overall experience didn't diminish from your appreciation of the man. Sometimes, you know, you meet somebody who's your idol, and you walk away going, okay. But this guy, it really sounds like he achieved what you were expecting and more.
Very, very classy, and exactly what I expected, actually, because the music is very reverent. It's very deep. It's very spiritual, and that's how John is personally, and it's exactly what I would have expected.
Really quick, before we get back into the interview, one of the things touched upon is the fact that they do like to play a little sport with themselves occasionally. Everybody thinks of them as such a serious band, yes. But
well, I love the fact that John referenced how Spinal Tap made him feel, and that when he was on stage in the 80s, if you see him laughing in those concert films, it's because he's thinking to himself, "My God, we're so Spinal Tap." And by the way, the concert film from that tour was directed by Steven Soderbergh, and he gives Yes credit for giving him his big break, and that is something that is not often talked about when people talk about Steven Soderbergh's career.
Not at all. That's outstanding. We're going to get back into the interview. This is great stuff. We'll be back after this.
You just celebrated your 35th anniversary with Yes, and it was a very comforting, very life-affirming thing for the fans of the band.
Yeah.
What was the significance for you and for the band?
Well, it was like I would say, the first 30 years were tough. The last 5 have been heaven, because you know, now it's like a dream. 10 years ago, it was a nightmare. You know, that's what it was. Because in bands, you're living with people for years and years, on and off, like family for 35 years, and you have your ups and your downs. It's never plain sailing. But in the end, it's very worthwhile.
Has your creative process, your songwriting process, has it changed over the years?
Not really, no. I think I've gone through a wonderful metamorphosis. When we moved into the house, I started putting up Christmas things outside just here, and I fell and broke my back. Very painful experience, breaking your back. So for 3 months, I really could hardly move, so I started playing the piano more, started singing at the piano, which was a great change in my perception of how to make music. I can actually sit down now and just write songs. I don't really watch what I'm playing. I think that's the key. If I started to work out the chords, I'd never get past working out the chords. I'd never be able to do it. So I just play and sing at the same time and just let it happen, which is a great feeling. And the songs that come out are very, very, very clear, very interesting songs. Well, one of the things that I realized working with Yes was that we could all memorize so much information. It's as though we'd be working on a piece of music. This is like in the mid-70s. We'd be working on sort of close to the edge section, and then I'd say, "What were we doing 2 days ago?" And Rick would say, "Oh, it was that part." I said, "Oh yeah, so that will fit with that part. So then we've done this part, third part, and we talk like this metaphor, like sort of, not metaphor, like semi-musical sign language. And we'd never write anything down, and then we'd finish up completing this 8-minute piece.
Tales from Topographic Oceans, much debated work. Yet now truly considered to be a masterpiece by most everyone. Was that researched? I mean, I know that it was inspired very much by the, Shastric scripture, and yet was the ritual itself researched? Because, I mean, you nailed it.
The idea was to link together 4 pieces of music somehow. I just had this idea, well, we've just done Close to the Edge, and I don't want to go back to doing short pieces of music. I want to hang something together in a very strong form. And I kept thinking the 4 seasons. There were 4 somethings.
Did it change your approach to composition when you realized that you had a band that could play anything you could write?
Yeah, I work with Steve is incredibly open. I would watch him and just, could you do that again? How did you play those 3 chords like that? 4 chords, and then you went to that, and then 5 chords later you went back to that, and he'd be saying, did I? I said, yeah. Could you do it again? And I think I tested him, and he would do it again just to show I can do this again, thinking, I better remember those chords. And then he'd play it for me, and I did that with Rick a lot, where I'd hear him playing something as he was checking out the keyboard. I'd say, Rick, you just played that. Could you play that again? And we'd sing to each other, and he'd play it. And then Steve would start joining in. So in a way, having musicians around you that were very able to really play most anything was like an education for me. It was like, gosh, we'd talk about Beethoven and Bach and Chopin with Rick, and I talked about Django Reinhardt or Rodrigo with Steve. And I'd say, could you play a part of that? And he would play part of that piece. And I said, could you change the key? And then change a couple of notes, and then you're doing this other thing that'll lead into that part. And that's how we worked. It was like I kept hearing stuff as it was being played and joining it together. And then Chris would walk in and start. He was late. Chris was always late. Always will be. And he would come in and, what are you doing? Oh, we're just writing this thing. I'll play some of that. And Chris, being very inventive as a bass player, just worked.
This is a Soundwaves exclusive. Steve Wagner and legendary founding Yes member Jon Anderson.
Prog rock.
Progressive rock.
It was hard to live with prog rock, because if you're in progressive music, we don't want to name it, because then it's not progressing anymore.
Right.
It's like prog rock, like you used to do in the 70s. He said, no, we're still doing it in the 90s. We're still progressing. So there was always that argument, but you're prog rock. 70s version. And no, we're 1998 here. What's the matter with you?
How did you and the guys in the band feel about being grouped in with other prog rock groups like Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Genesis?
Well, as I said, that takes you back to being in the 70s, and I didn't particularly like the idea that we were from the 70s. I said, look, it's 1997, 98. Can we not be from here now? And we used to be there, but we're here now,
You listen to Magnification, which is truly one of my favorite Yes albums.
Good. I like that.
It's a phenomenal piece of work, and it definitely shows that the band is still progressing musically.
Yeah.
And we got the concept of, I think progressive is a good thing.
Yeah.
Like liberal, I think liberal is a good thing. I don't know how these words somehow come to be turned into something that they're not, because progressive, like liberal, are both.
It's a sort of stigma
Yes.
of knowing what it really truly is only for you to believe anyway. Sticks and stones and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But the idea of, I did a show in Cleveland with a youth orchestra, and we performed Give Love Each Day from the Magnification album, and it starts off, standing here on sacred ground. And it's such a great song to sing. And we never actually performed it with the band. So all I remember of that concert with the youth orchestra was these kids up in the balcony. There's about 20 little kids singing in the chorus. Give love each day, give love. And they were swaying side to side. And some of them, you could see the top of their heads over the balcony. Give love each day. It was so beautiful. I actually am very lucky to be able to travel the world and realize that, as far as I am led to believe, 95% of the world is living an incredible life experience. And there are 5% of absolute chaos. But it isn't as bad as it seems. And I think there's a lot to be, very encouraging when you consider that if you put together all the human beings that are on this earth energy and understand there is more to life and nature than we could ever imagine, that we as humans are only a small part of the world conscious experience. The human being is the one that says, there's the moon. The coyote just howls at it. But we're the ones that say, there's the moon. But they howl at it saying the same thing.
Yes.
In a different manner, in a different consciousness. I'm always sort of afraid of the scientists that say, well, chimpanzees and lesser beings, than us. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. There are higher beings than us living in our circumference, in our world.
Right.
And I'm continually writing songs about the evolution experience of what I'm going through. And it comes out in these days, very simple form. There's a song that I might sing. It's called the Buddha song. And the chorus is, I want to thank you, Buddha, for being my teacher. I want to thank you, Jesus, for bringing this love. I want to thank you, Mohammed, for being the prophet and singing of Krishna from heaven above. And when I wrote the song, I was just sort of in this great place, And then I played it to a friend of mine who has this children's choir down in LA, and he got them to sing it. And we got some kids to sing it in London on a video that we did. That's going to come out sometime in August, September. Now, what are these kids singing it? What are they thinking? Oh, wait a minute. Muhammad isn't the great evil one that we're sort of being told, that the Muslims aren't really, and the Chinese aren't really, whatever. You told as a child that the Chinese are on the road to hell because they're not Christians, and I don't want to get into any religious battles, but they have as much right to live on this world as we have, and we should not denounce them or denounce their God through Buddha or Krishna or Muhammad or our Jesus, or I always have to think about people that live in Indonesia and Bali. When I first went there, and they would say a musician is as important as a farmer, as important as a teacher. And I'd say, yes, that's it. Education on a musical level, especially as I've heard in California, is going downhill. It's so bizarre that in probably the wealthiest part of the world, that we're letting go of education in music, education in Aborigine culture of this world, not just the American native, but the great knowledge that surrounds us is falling out of education in order to build up what? Better businessmen, or better go-getters, or better big guys who can play football. Sorry, 49ers, we need those.
No, it's true. The Niners do need those guys.
We need some big guys. Well, say for instance that everything is an illusion, then we are going through this illusion, and at the other end of the day, there will come a time when everything will wake up to that true fact that we are here for one reason alone, and that is to find the divine, to find the creator. And in finding that, you can only do that through the inspiration of the arts, the inspiration of nature, better living for everybody, in a natural form. It's got very little to do with power, very little to do with warlike tendencies.
Competition.
And competition. It's a very natural event. As I say, when I travel around to places like Malaga or Paris or Madrid or all over the world, you see 95% of the people just getting on with life. they have to succumb to what's going on by government, but they're just getting on with living and enjoying the day.
Right.
And the time will come when it will resolve.
Sure.
It has to resolve.
Of course it will.
Yeah.
And we are back. Almost time to wrap things up on a very special edition of Soundwaves. But man, Steve, you hooked that one up. That was phenomenal. And listening to him talk, and not only what a perspective, worldly, but what a career. 35 years and counting. These guys are just going and going and going.
It is truly unique in the history of popular music. You'll see a singer sustain a career for 30 or 40 years, but only the very few, like a Sinatra or a Tony Bennett or something like that. Yes, they're still rolling, they're still getting better at 35 years. I mean, not even the Stones still have their original members 40 years into the game. Yes has created something truly unique in the history of pop music. It's obvious that their music still really resonates with the fans. They toured last year with the original, the classic lineup of John Anderson, Chris Squire, Steve Howe, Alan White, and Rick Wakeman, and it was the 12th largest grossing tour of the year.
Nice.
These guys are nearly 60 or in their 60s, and like the Rolling Stones, there just doesn't seem to be an end in sight.
We are definitely looking forward to the follow-up. 5 years, 10 years from now, you're going to have to come back and file these reports for us.
I absolutely look forward to doing it.
Excellent. Final thoughts about spending a day with John Anderson?
I'll never forget it, and I hope that it's not the last time we connect.
Outstanding. Steve, thank you so much. Always great having you on the show. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you to John Anderson, and until next time, we'll see you.